Welcome to the Ring Spaces studio in Neil on Business. Neil on Business is a show where we dig deep into the entrepreneurial mindset and try to discover what makes business success, from discipline to disruption. I'm your host, Neil Darling, entrepreneur, father, husband, and straight shooter when it comes to what it really takes to win in business. Each week, I'll plan to sit down with movers and shakers ranging from former Marines, business leaders, bold thinkers, and disruptors who traded uniforms for boardrooms and built successful businesses and brought the attitude and fortitude required for success. If you're looking for real conversations about leadership, grit, and building something that lasts, you're in the right place. Let's get to work. Welcome, Justin. Now, is it Lapier or Lapier? Or you a hockey player, Lapier? What is it?
So actually, we go by Lapier. But,
Lapier. Okay, we'll go with Lapier. This is Neil on Business. My guest, Justin Lapier. Is that right? Okay, cool.
Perfect.
I am Neil Darling. We're in the Ring Spaces studio here in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I'm here with my new friend. We just met, but I think we're friendly. So Justin is founder and CEO of, is it 1, 2, 3 companies?
Yeah, you could say
Okay.
3.
Okay. So Justin has a story, a very interesting story. He has impressed me. We talked a little bit the other day, and Justin has told me that he is very driven, and by all accounts, he is. He tells me about his employees. You have almost 20 employees up here in Stafford County. You just bought a building. You have a real estate company. You have a software company, and you have, what's the third?
It's another software company. It was actually a product. So one of my companies is a consulting business where we develop for businesses, and then another one is actually a product we've been working on.
Okay, so is it like a SaaS product?
SaaS product, yeah.
Software service and that. So we're going to talk a little bit about you. We usually just start from the beginning and we go to the end, and we really like to focus on the entrepreneurial journey. It's always very interesting, but I think tonight and this in the evening that we're doing this podcast, I think your story is really interesting. So we're going to bounce around a little bit, and I think everybody will figure out why. So we're grateful for you to come here and be here, and I think initially, why don't you just give us just an overview about you? Start from the beginning.
Start from the beginning. So the beginning of my story, or just a little bit?
Where are you from? Like, where were you born?
Yeah. So I'm born in Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania County. I grew up in the county, but my mother's from here. My father's from upstate New York.
Where in upstate New York?
Plattsburgh.
Okay.
About 60 miles from Montreal.
Well, yeah, where, they invented snow up there, right?
Exactly.
It's really cold. Are you a hockey player as a result, or no?
I'm not. My father grew up, he was like a speed skater back in the day and played football too, and stuff. He got stationed down here in the Marines, at Quantico, so that's why he ended up down here.
Okay, cool. All right, keep going. So you're in Spotsylvania County. You're what high school?
So I graduated from Cortland. I went to multiple schools along my journey because my parents got divorced when I was younger. So there was kind of a split there. The youngest of 3 brothers. I have by youngest by far. My brother above me, my middle brother, was 9 years older than me, and my brother Sean is 15 years older than me. So I was a baby.
So you're the baby.
Totally the baby.
Okay. So you're 8. What year you graduated high school about?
2002.
2002. Okay, cool. So you decide you're not going to college, right? Initially?
Yeah. My background is a lot of my family was military. And coming out of high school, my dad was a Marine Corps officer, and he said, go Navy or Air Force, and he said they live. So he forced me, not forced me, but when I ended up going the route of choosing military, I ended up going the Navy route. And
okay, so what was your MS in the Navy?
So I was an aviation electrician. I was stationed in Pensacola, Florida, and that's where I learned my AA school, and then got transferred up to Norfolk.
Okay, okay. So you're in the Navy for how long?
So I ended up only being in the Navy for a couple years.
Okay, and we'll come back to that. So you're in the Navy for a couple years, and where did you work? So after you got out of the Navy, where did you work?
So out of the Navy, I ended up going back to school and going to Germana and taking some computer classes. And while doing that...
Did you get your associates or no?
Yeah, I got my associates in computer science there.
High five. I'm a community college grad myself. I went 4 schools in 5 years, but I got through. And I'm a political scientist, for the record. Just joking. I'm a scientist. I'm a political scientist. Not really. All right. So you're out of the Navy and you get your first job and you're working retail, or you're working?
Yeah, I was just doing. I was a server at a restaurant. I was working at Applebee's. Well, I did a little construction before that, but then mainly it was Applebee's, serving and waiting tables. I was an Apple Buddy.
Yeah, and you didn't get the Apple Buddy, right? And you didn't get your first tech job yet or anything like that. So you're selling hams too, you said?
Selling hams. I went over to Honey Baked Ham and glazed some hams. That was a fun process, for a few holidays, Thanksgiving, Easter and stuff. Did that for a little bit, while I was, going through and getting my degree. And to go back to Germana just for a second, I was going through there, actually going for a computer networking degree to run wires and do networking, because that's what my brother did for the government. And was really successful, so I thought that was a route that I wanted to go.
Easy street, pulling cable for the government. Okay. So how long do you work in an Applebee's? So how old are you before you get your first break?
So I was at Applebee's for about 5 years, between Applebee's and Honey Baked Ham for about 5 years, and then finally got in with, so it's actually kind of funny. Going back to my brother for a second, I applied at his company to work as a government contractor, and they were in between contracts. I didn't hear anything from them for months and months and months, and finally I applied locally here to Intuit, to work at the Intuit office, and the week I received my Intuit offer letter, the same week my brother's company offered me a gig, and this was 6 months after I'd interviewed with them, but kind of decided, I don't want to do that commute every day like we talked about the other day up and down to DC,
Yeah. So Intuit, for people who don't know, at the time at least, had almost 400 employees in Stafford, Virginia. I think it was the QuickBooks or the Quicken. I'm not sure.
They had multiple. So Intuit does a lot of things. I mean, most people will know them through like TurboTax and QuickBooks, but they also sell checks and things like that. And they had a location in Stafford, Virginia, that had multiple business units. And it's funny, that location was actually, out of how large and global that Intuit is, that was one of the only locations in the world that they actually owned the buildings. So
you go there and you interview, but what position are you interviewing for?
So at the time, they owned a company called Homestead that did websites for businesses. Okay. So it was kind of in their mantra of small business and fit in there. So I interviewed for that to be, a sales and support person, on the phone helping people with their websites, but also at the same time upselling services and selling services like that.
Yeah, and Intuit is a 100-pound gorilla. At least it was in Stafford. Great jobs. They pay well. It's not like the other insurance company across the street. But right. So it was a good opportunity. So you interview on a Tuesday?
It was like a Tuesday. I go through the interview process with them,
or previously, but on Tuesday you find out.
Yeah.
Hey, you got the offer.
Exactly. They offered to me, and at the time I was still at Applebee's. Yeah. So they offered it to me and asked me to start the following Monday.
So it's Tuesday, and they want you to start on Monday.
Exactly.
And that must have been the happiest week of your life.
Yeah.
You quit Applebee's. You told him, I'm not even eating ham anymore. I'm done.
Exactly.
I'm moving on. I got my tech career ahead of me. I'm not commuting up to DC. I'm going to go to Stafford. I'm more than commercial, international company. And I'm gonna do it. So you're freaking psyched. It's been 6 years of you thinking about getting that big break.
Yeah, and countless other interviews, beforehand. So, this was the first time, I finally, was getting my foot in the door to what I truly wanted to do in life, and that was tech and software.
Okay, so you get to the end of the week, and what happens?
So on Friday, before I'm supposed to start, after I've already told my previous employers that I was going to be leaving, and they were understanding, because it wasn't a normal 2 weeks, but normally I would totally do that. But they understood I was going into the career that I wanted. I got a phone call from.
So this is Friday before you're starting on Tuesday.
Friday before I'm starting on Tuesday, so I'm starting in 2 days or 3 days, and I get a phone call from the recruiter that said, hey, we can't have you start on Monday because we haven't gotten all your background check stuff back. That hasn't been handled yet.
Okay, so they probably did get your background check back. Why did they make that phone call?
Because I was involved in and I know that we're going to get into this, but when I was younger, while I was in the Navy, I was involved in a very bad car accident that was my fault. That ended up having some legal things that I had to deal with.
So you were charged with manslaughter?
Yes, I was charged with 1 count of involuntary manslaughter.
Stop. Okay. Holy shit. So let's just move to the present day for a minute. So you basically, in the past, and we're going to get back to that a little bit, but in the past, you had a drunk driving incident that resulted in a car accident.
Yes. Yeah. It was.
So you're in the Navy, and we're going to get to that. So let's go to the present day. Now, you have this company, and I have to say it right, is Synctivate?
Synctivate, you got it.
Synctivate, all right, there we go. So how long has Synctivate been around?
Since 2019. It started at November of 2019, 2 months before the pandemic hit.
Probably great timing when you look back, right?
I mean, it wasn't bad, and I can throw that little feather in my cap that I did this, started my business right before this pandemic hit, and we've been successful since then.
All right, so you have now, we're going to say, you ended up developing connectors or software related to Intuit, right?
Yeah, we work on a system that Intuit previously owned that I actually worked on as one of the groups when I was there, and we build business systems for clients.
Yeah. So you've built this business, and you have almost 20 employees now?
Yeah, between full-time employees and some of the contractors that we have, I think we have right around like 17 to 20, something like that, yeah.
And you told me that, and this is, I've talked a little bit about you with other people, and they assess your personality as driven, that you are hard charger, that you're, what did you say to me? You said, how big is this company going to get in Stafford County?
Yeah, so my goal for our product Buildable, the new company that we formed over the last couple of years. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I want to build $1 billion business in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why? And then I'm going to ask you how, but why first?
Well, I mean, the why, it's in some ways it's kind of bad to lead off with the financial aspect, because that's not the goal of it. I mean, the goal, that's a side thing to it. But I mean, getting my feet wetted into it, working with so many small businesses, I saw that small businesses need help, and they put food on the table for families. And that's what I want to help. That's what I want to build. And by building something to allow small businesses to be, more successful, and hopefully with our product, put time back in their day, time with their families, their success will, our success will just come from that.
So it's not Synctivate, it's going to be $1 billion company. It's
Buildable.
Buildable, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little more about Buildable, because there's a big idea here, and I'm not a VC, but if a VC said, let me see your business plan, and that would literally be the biggest hockey stick anybody's ever seen. And I don't want to focus on revenue either, but it's more than zero, right? I mean, it's more than 100,000, it's more than 1 million, it's more than 10 million. How do you scale to, what is Buildable? What is the secret sauce here that's gonna make it scale so good? So
it's funny, I've been doing this for so long, and I know this inside and out, and still, a challenging pitch at times to business owners. But I was talking to one of our marketing consultants recently, and basically Buildable is a product that any business can build a system on. A lot of businesses that go out there to that need a system to run their business, there's not something off the shelf that they can just grab. There's a lot of unique businesses, and Buildable is a platform that any business can go in, and without needing to write code or anything, can develop a solution that can run their business, can customize it to their business. And I've seen the power of that from other systems.
So it's accounting, is it like a whole suite of?
Yeah, I would think of it more in the lines of like CRM, project management type of tool that you can build, instead of, a lot of businesses out there are passing around spreadsheets, and that's not a successful organization for your business. So putting this in the cloud, something that you can actually run a solution that's customized to your unique needs, and you don't have to fit into like a box of something that, of some software that just already exists.
How far along is it?
So, we're 2 years in. We've been, funding it with our company Synctivate, to get it up and running. But it launched back in January. It's one of those where, hey, it's like my maybe I wouldn't have launched, there are certain things that I wanted in the product, but if you look at software, you got to get it out there, get it in the hands of other people, and then get feedback and just iterate on it. So we launched it in January, and we've been really adding features, adding bugs. We're incorporating a lot of AI. I mean, that's buzzword for everybody nowadays, but we're incorporating a lot of AI into it, and it's up and running, and we're really starting to kick off the marketing now. And one thing that we want to do here locally is that we want to start doing a lot of sessions with local small business owners and growing it in our area. And we want to start helping small business owners in the Fredericksburg area, and from there it's just going to spread. That's
exciting. So it's prototyped, it's working. What do you call it? MVP, a viable product. So you have something. Is it worth selling, or is it kind of a beta right now?
Oh no! I mean, it's definitely worth selling. I mean, it's if you're using a spreadsheet for your business, Buildable can do it and can do it, on steroids.
Right.
And so
now you also have a small real estate company, but you're interested in that too. But you basically have three hats, and you're looking at commercial real estate, and you're doing more traditional business, right?
Exactly. Yeah, my brother and I just recently, to be honest with you, I got tired of landlords. So my brother and I recently just partnered together. My brother's, as I said, is a government contractor, and partnered together and bought our first commercial property and moved Synctivate into that location.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, good. Yeah. So, all right, so now we're gonna back up again. So you go back to Intuit, and you're on Friday. You're like, they're saying there's a problem with your background, and in fact, there is. It's actually been hanging over your head for a while. You probably, even early on, meaning people had the ability to, do searches and do different things, and your resume would never get escalated because there would always be a black dot next to your name for, what happened. So let's go back to the event. So when you're basically at 2009, right?
This was
2019. I mean. So 2009.
The car accident. My car accident actually occurred in 2004.
2004. Yeah. Okay. So 2004.
I was 19 at the time.
Tell us what happened. So tell us what happened. You got a brand new Acura.
Yeah. So I kind of started at when you're in the Navy and you go from A school to your first duty station, which mine was from Pensacola, Florida to Norfolk. You get a little week break. In between week break usually, and I really wanted a Acura RSX Type S at the time. That was one of the hot little sporty cars, and I came home from my A school for a week, and went with my father, and had a decent job at the time, being in the military, and we went up and we went to Maryland and purchased this Acura RSX that I really liked, and come back, I'm in my uniform showing it off to all my friends, I've got this new car and everything like that. And then, all my buddies that were in town, we were obviously hanging out. We hadn't seen each other in months since I had been, to boot camp and everything. And, being like dumb teenagers at the time, my buddies wanted to have some beers and go out one night, and we, some of me and my buddies met at my house and hopped in the car and
headed for Twisties.
Yeah, exactly. We had a few beers. I mean, I will say that not like we were hammered, you know what I mean? We had a few beers. It was just we were young, at the time doing stupid things. And what do young boys do in cars? And I'm not, at all saying that this is something that somebody should do, or anything. But we wanted to go fast and be stupid. And obviously, I'm the driver. It's my responsibility. And me and my friends actually went out that night, and we got back to my dad's house that night. And we were back at my dad's house, and everything was fine. And then one of my buddies called up a girl, and the girl was like, "Hey, why don't you guys come over?" So we, four of us hopped in the car. It was my buddy Justin, in the passenger seat next to me, and then my buddies Chris and Chad. They were in the back seat, and we go over to this girl's house. So I think we spent maybe 5 minutes there.
Yeah.
And then I hopped in the car, and to paint the picture, I mean, we were teenagers playing Need for Speed, songs and Danger Zone and things like that, in the car, and it was going fast and driving on country roads, and I was coming up over a hill. Everything was fine, we were happy, just being dumb kids, and I was coming over the road, and the next thing I remember looking back, and the car is this is in the middle of the accident, looking back at my friends as the car is actually rolling. And the car, from what I recollect, at the time, my car ended up on its side, and I actually climbed out laying on the passenger side, that is, up on its side, and I actually climbed out of the driver's side and actually, I don't know how, but at the time pushed the car back over onto its wheels. I remember opening up the passenger door, and my buddy Justin got out, and he was all right. And I remember he was, freaking out at the time. And I went around to the car and opened up the driver's side door, and my buddy Chris was in the seat behind me. And I tried pulling Chris out of the car, and at the same time I was on the phone with 911, and I couldn't even tell them the road that it was on. And yet, as I mentioned before, my parents were divorced. I was only a quarter of a mile from my mom's house. Mm-hmm. It was a road I had driven on 1,000,000 times in my life, and I couldn't tell him where I was. And I'm trying to pull my buddy out of the car, and he was already gone. I didn't, I didn't, I wasn't realizing it at the time. And then I remember the ambulance getting there, and the first thing they did was they just put a sheet over the back of the car. Like they already knew that my buddy Chris and Chad had passed away. And next thing you know, I'm in the ambulance. They're taking me to the hospital and not allowing me to drink water because they want to test me for alcohol and things like that. And that just started a whirlwind of my life, the worst day ever in my life. And for the record, I would, I'd take my friend's place any day of the week that I could, it was just a hard time, Then that started the proceedings of then, here I am dealing with my lost friends and, lives affected from this. And at the same time, I'm now having to worry about the police coming and taking me to jail and dealing with legal proceedings and dealing with the effects of my military career, and which is nothing compared to losing my friends. I don't want to,
No.
Everything else is minimized compared to losing my friends, but it was, a compilation of things that I then had to deal with. So then I'm, in the Navy, I'm being pulled out of my squadron and put in legal hold and going through JAG proceedings to see if I'm going to get kicked out of the military, and then dealing with civil criminal procedure, back here in Fredericksburg at the same time while I'm down there in Norfolk. And, after that accident, flat out, I shut down for years. Like I wouldn't hang out with friends, even though I was in Norfolk. I would come home every weekend, but in the evenings after work in the Navy, at home on the weekends, all I would do is just play computer games and just get in with like my friends that I knew worldwide that I played games with, and like that was my only escape. I was going into this world of this game, and that was making me forget about the rest of life. And that continued on until I believe it was like that happened in April, my car accident. And then in October, November, I forget the exact months, but October, November of that year is when, the legal proceedings occurred, and I actually, had to go and spend time in jail, because of it. And just to backtrack on myself a little bit, like, I'm a kid that's never been in trouble in my life, never been in trouble, never done anything wrong. It's one of those things where, for anybody listening to this, like, you think that things can't happen to you. Well, they can, and obviously it was my fault. I'm not minimizing that either at all, but like, you just don't think these things are going to happen to you. And, I know, I don't know if you wanted to cover this part, but to take it back even a step further, that was when I was 19. When I was 12, my parents had actually divorced, and my brother Jamie, I say 12, I was actually 10 at the time because he was 9 years older than me. My brother Jamie, when he was 19, I was 10, got killed on a motorcycle. So I had the experience of, my parents' divorce. I had the experience of being 10 years old and losing my brother, and then this experience of my own, 9 years later when I was 19. And, it was hard.
So you end up getting convicted 5 months, you said?
So I got sentenced to 5 years, but suspended
Yeah.
all but like 5 months is what I ended up spending, in jail. Yeah.
So I guess you get over that. I guess you're getting out of the Navy, right? And
well, actually, the funny part about that is when before my court proceedings, I went through the JAG stuff, and I was able to stay in the Navy. I beat those, but then after, my civil court, and I went to jail. I was still technically in the Navy. I went back to the Navy, had to go through the proceedings again, and that time I then got out of the Navy, and that's when the arc started of Applebee's.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So how? And again, it is not a psychological podcast. I'm not trained, and I'm not. So how do you start that recovery? Obviously, the day you get out of jail and things start settling down, and I would say, thank God for Applebee's. But how did you make that transition into Applebee's? How long did it take for you to start saying, okay, I need to take my first step forward?
I think even when I started at Applebee's, it took me a couple of years.
Yeah.
Like there were definitely mornings where I got up and I didn't even want to go take a shower. I couldn't even break myself to go and step in the shower. And it just, honestly, it took time. You know, I don't want to like lie and say like there's some like magic bullet or magic pill or something that you can do. It took time, you know, and yeah, I remember it to this day. I mean, this isn't, you know, as much of a tragedy per se, but like my brother passed away on May 8th, 1996. Well, then even after my car accident, my parents were divorced. I was living with my mom for a bit. Her house burns down on May 8th while I'm living with her after that. And then, you know, I remember us having to go and live in an apartment. And I can just remember it vaguely. The only reason I bring that up is I can remember that vaguely of just waking up mornings and like in that apartment and not even wanting to go to the shower to be able to like go about my day. Like I had to really push myself to just even go out and see friends. You know, it took time. And to add on top of it at the same time, I didn't want to be a server. You know, I wanted to, you know, start my tech journey and have a real career. And, you know, I can't tell you how many, I mean, dozens of opportunities that I got turned down from because of, you know, that conviction. And, you know, I'm looking at it like, you know, I lost my best friend. It's not like I went into a 7-Eleven and held it up with a gun or something like that, you know, but not many people wanted to take a chance on me. And it was hard. I mean, that added to the depression there, because it's like, am I ever going to be able to achieve, you know, what I think that I can achieve? And at the same time, like, as I told you the other day when we talked a little bit before this, like, I don't want my friends' names to be in vain. I feel like, you know, I'd take their place any day of the week, but if I can't do that, then I got to make something of myself. You know, I can't let this be a waste. And that was eating at me too. You know, that was driving me to like do better, be better.
Yeah. Reminds me, again, we spoke briefly yesterday, I guess the day before, but I hate to talk about movies, but the first scene of, you know, Saving Private Ryan, where they're in the cemetery and, you know, and he's crying and his wife comes over and, you know, you sort of, you know, the whole thing was at the end of the movie, you know, obviously Tom Hanks is like, you got to earn this, you know, Ryan. And in a way, you know, I think that's a weight that, you know, most people don't understand. I know it's a different story, and I'm not saying it's a act of valor or other things, but in a way that you have to, you know, when I heard how driven you are and how successful you seem to be on a path, you know, you're a sharp object running really, really fast, you know, and I worry about you a little bit. I just met you, but, you know, that journey is difficult because I think that's weighing on you. You say, you know, I have the memory of my friends, and I want to be worthy of, you know, being the one to survive. And I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what occurred to me at least.
No, I mean it's completely accurate. Mine was an accident. It's something that, you know, I did, and you know, I regret every single day, you know, but yeah, if I didn't try to succeed, you know, I feel like I would be completely letting them down, you know, and you know, I wasn't gonna let that happen.
So you're at Applebee's, you're at the ham store, literally your first break is you get this job offer. If we're going back to this now, you get to Friday, obviously you probably all week were worried that you can't believe that this is going so well, that the other shoe's going to drop. And the recruiter probably fibbed a little bit and said, oh, we didn't get the background back yet, but apparently they did, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, and to let everybody know out there, like, I was open with everyone about it, you know, like, I wasn't going to, like, hide it, you know, and stuff, because it was going to come up anyway, so, you know, so I was open about it, but yeah, they definitely, you know, here I tell these other companies that, hey, I'm done, and then, you know, after I do that, I get a call saying, well, you can't start, you know, on Monday.
So what did you do then?
So
this is an important first step, and this is where, you know, so tell us what happened on Friday after you got off the phone with the recruiter. What did you do?
Yeah, so I love my dad. Yeah. You know, I love my dad to death. My dad's been one of my strongest supporters, and you know, he looked at me and he said, Justin, he said, you're going to go in on Monday. And I said, Dad, come on. He's like, no, go in on Monday. And I was nervous as all get out. And I showed up that Monday morning, and the instructor looked at me and said, you know, with this group of 30 other people in there, he looked at me and said, oh, you're here. And he said, hold on one second, let's go step out in the hallway and let's chat for a second. So I stepped out there, and he said, yeah, I was told by the recruiter that we didn't have your background stuff back, and you were going to have to possibly start another class. You know, they wanted to hold off on you starting. He said, but let me make a phone call real quick. And he called over to the instructor's name was Steve Haney with Intuit, great guy. He called over to what was going to be my future boss that offered me the gig or the job, and Zip is what we called him. And Zip came over and said to Steve, listen, I approve it, let's just let him start. And I got a seat at the table in the interview. Wow. I mean, not the interview, in the training class. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank my dad, for doing that, because who knows? I mean, if I wouldn't have gone in on that day, if you don't, I mean, I know it's a totally different scenario maybe for other people, but if you don't take that chance, who knows if I would have even gotten in the next training class.
Can you imagine though, like what would have happened to you mentally if you got that close? Yeah, obviously you just quit your jobs. Maybe you could have went back there, but if you end up starting $1 billion company, or like the things that happen every day, you don't really realize that has potentially, you look back and you can trace back to one thing, has a significant impact on the future path that you got to take in your journey. So I also thought about it when we first talked about it, that reminds me of these dads that are out there and catching a bat from hitting their kid's head in the ballpark, these famous dad things. But it's one of those things that it almost seems like, divine intervention, that someone said, enough, just show up,
I mean, that's a big key in everything,
They
right?
could have sent you home. I'm sure you're like, I don't want to do that. I mean, they're going to be mad at me. They're going to escort me off the property. They're going to embarrass me in front of everybody. You somehow or another, you got the courage to just show up and get out in the hallway, get through that. And somebody said, the entire manager said, enough. Let's just go with it. So that starts your Intuit career, right?
That started my Intuit career.
What kind of an Intuit employee were you?
So this was my first, jump into actually the corporate world. So I had to get my feet wet there for a little bit, and I learned a lot in that group that I was in. And
were you ever late? I mean, were you a shitty employee at all?
It's funny. I was actually one of those employees. We were at a call center. I was one of those ones that would show up every day in a button-down shirt and, and khaki pants. And people would look at me like, what? When others were showing up in pajamas and stuff for work. That's what I did. And Intuit's I can't speak enough great words about that company. They were so awesome. And even, at the time I was actually dating a girl, and she was into acting, and she wanted to move to LA, and they actually allowed me to transfer with the company out to LA, and I worked in their merchant services group out there. And then we broke up after 6 months, and then I came back to Fredericksburg, and when I came back, I worked in the QuickBooks Online group as another sales and support consultant. And then within 6 months of that, I was training all the new hires coming in. So I trained over 200 new employees that came in for that group. And the rest is kind of,
So how long were you at Intuit?
So I was at Intuit probably about 5 years. So let me lead you into that next arc. So the last group that I was in at Intuit was a product they had called QuickBase. I left QuickBooks Online and went into that group. And QuickBase is a product similar to Buildable, the product that we're building. Very much, if people have heard of like Salesforce and stuff, it's very much like that. Yeah. So I was in this group called QuickBase, but we would sell that product to people. We wouldn't actually develop the systems for them. If they wanted the systems developed, they had to do it on their own or hire an outside company, a partner company. And while I was at that group actually got acquired by a VC firm and became its own company. And I left there and joined one of the partner organizations to start developing these systems for people. So to backtrack for just a second, QuickBase was used internally at Intuit all over the place. They were actually the biggest customer of their own product, and I used it there. But then moving into this group, I started learning how to develop on it, as you just kind of asked. That's where I started getting my development chops of actually building on the program.
Now, there's some aspects. Are you a proponent of no-code development? Is it like what is the secret sauce here for what you're doing, Ellis, with your SaaS product? I mean, without, I don't want to secret sauce, but like generally, what's going to make this thing go?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the disclaimer, I love QuickBase, but the kicker on it is that I wrote an article about this recently, that I believe that no code that they talk about in software for the last 30 years has been a complete lie. You talk about no code as in, you're not a programmer that needs to be able to develop, or you don't need to know how to program to develop the solution, but business owners, they have to focus on their business. They don't have time to learn a product to build something. And, if they don't have time to learn it, they have to hire a company like my company, Synctivate, or a partner company to develop it for them, which, costs money, takes time, taking your knowledge and giving it to this other company to be able to build this solution for you, which we do quite well at Synctivate. But the goal with Buildable is as I said, buzzwords AI, we are building a no-code solution, but that has a ton of AI incorporated into it. Our goal with Buildable is that you never need to hire a company like our other company, Synctivate. That even if you're a small business owner, you can get in there and just talk to the product and have it build the solution that you need with way cutting back that learning curve.
Okay.
So it's no code, but now with the
no code is done by the AI. It sounds like
exactly.
And then the little bit of coding is
if you
need for customization and stuff like that.
Exactly. If you're going to need further customization with our product Buildable, like real in-depth integrating with other systems and stuff, you may still need to hire a company. But for the majority of it, we want to make it so that a small business owner can get up and running and have a system up and running within a day.
Wow.
So that's our goal with the product.
Yeah. So all right. So what's the journey? So now you're pick up where we left off.
Yep. So I left QuickBase.
What year is it now about?
This would be it's right around the 2012 timeframe. It's funny, I got to look at my LinkedIn history to know exactly exact dates and times, but it's right around that timeframe. Yeah. I left and I joined a company called Simpo. They were based out of California and they were a partner company. And great group of people. But going back to my childhood, I always wanted to own my own business and do something and build something.
Yeah.
I'm constantly thinking, constantly coming up with new ideas. So again, just like Intuit, where I kind of got my feet wet with the corporate route, with Simpo, I understand how a partner company operated.
Yeah.
Got to work there for 3 years, and then that's when Simpo I started, I guess, in 2016, because I worked there for 3 years, and I started 2015 timeframe is when I left QuickBase, joined Simpo, and then 2019 is when I started Synctivate.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're ready to go.
Now I'm ready to go.
So Synctivate started, why?
So Synctivate started because I always wanted to own my own business and do my own thing. And at Simpo, I was a developer, but it's funny, I was also the PM of most of my projects. I was also the account manager.
Sales experience, which is always good.
Exactly. And so, I worked with some customers where it was just me doing everything. And one of my clients at the time said, well, if you're leaving, we're coming with you because we only work with you and we're only here because of you.
Yeah.
And, this is the power of building these systems for clients. That client at the time, they were a remediation company, did like water mitigation, but on a larger scale than residential. They did large commercial buildings. And they were a $14 million a year business named National Drying Technologies. And they could only invoice 50 jobs at a time. And it would take them 3 weeks to get out of invoice because that's how big these jobs were. We built a system for them where they could take on unlimited jobs, or mainly I built the initial system for them. They could take on unlimited jobs and invoice within 24 hours. And because of that, they were acquired by Sunbelt within 3 years, Sunbelt Rentals, within 3 years for $100 million. Okay. So we took them from a $14 million business by putting systems in place for them to where they could get acquired for $100 million.
Wow.
And now they're still our client to this day. And so my team is actually going down there next week.
So Sunbelt's your marquee.
Yeah, that's our definite, some of my best friends with them now. I think, going back to, if there's a little nugget when it comes to business and running business that I'll throw out there, it's, even when I was at Intuit in the support and sales role, we had sales goals, but I've never really been a salesman per se.
Yeah.
But I was always top on the sales because I don't try to sell you. I like to learn the product, know it inside and out, and then when you have questions, I can address any question, any need that you have with it. And because of that, I was successful in sales because people trusted me.
Yeah, it's a consultative sale.
Exactly. So just trusting, that's so
key because even my customers are smart. I mean, they're not stupid, and even if they don't know everything that you know, they will throw objections out there that they're really just meant as a litmus test to see, whether you're even worth talking to. So if you throw this objection out there and you can't respond, it's not good. Versus a salesperson or somebody who is a consultative seller who can address the concern. And it's great because you're like, then you just build up that goodwill. Just bucket overflows. And they're just ripe for closing, but it's really the best kind of customer, and it's actually the best kind of partner because you understand the problem, and if they have an objection, you say, hey, this is the approach. Even if you don't know exactly how to fix it, you know what the problem is, and you know how to go back to your team and say, hey, this is what the requirements for this fix are.
100%. I tell the clients all the time at Synctivate, new prospective customers, I just want you to be happy. And we're about quality over quantity. Like, we could have more clients than we have, but we have a bunch of great clients that we love to work with that become multi-year relationships. I mean, what's the point of just constantly churning new clients when you can have some great clients that you build a relationship with over years?
Okay, so great story. Now, it's a sad story too. I mean, so you have this burden on you. So, and I'm not keep going back to it, but I know you do some things like you mentioned about. Tell me what you do to kind of honor your friends and take that responsibility. And what do you do to try to pay it back a little bit? So, tell me what you do.
Yeah, I mean, years ago, this hasn't, just for clarification's sake, it hasn't been a recent thing, but years ago I did go, in front of the court system here in Spotsylvania County and talk to young kids getting their licenses for the first time and told them my story because, my thought was if I had one kid, then it was worth it having that conversation with them. So
I have 5 kids and I've been through that 5 times, and I'm in Stafford. It is the best thing. I don't know who came up with that, but it is the best thing that Virginia does. I'm not sure it's countywide or statewide, but what a great program where the judge, it's no joke. They literally are like, I don't have to give you a license. And we have folks like you that go in there earnestly and say, look, don't make this mistake, and this is what's going to happen, because kids just don't want to listen, and then they hear the story and they're like, oh my God, it's impactful, So good for you that you do that. Did you do that multiple years?
I did a while ago. I mean, but I still try to have this impact across the board with other young kids that I do speak to. I mean, I know it's family, but I was just got his license, and just explaining to him, like, hey, and this is my approach. Some people not my approach to everybody, more so closer, people and stuff, but my approach is, I know kids are going to do dumb things, I know you're going to do some dumb stuff. Try to be as safe as possible while doing it. Like, kids are kids. Look at what happened in my past and don't do that. Don't go out there and do that, type of thing. So, to be quite honest with you, for years, I didn't even want people to know about it. I didn't even want to tell a lot of people about it. I remember, starting to date my wife, and, a couple weeks into dating my wife, I was like, she grew up in this area too, but we went to different schools, and like, I remember sitting there at the table with her one night and like starting to open up about my car accident, and fearful that like this girl's not even going to want anything to do with me anymore, after I tell her about this. And luckily I got a great girl, and she looked at me and she was like, Justin, I already know about your car accident. Like, but that's how scared I was to even tell somebody like that, So, it took time to even be able to, this is my first time, this podcast, vocalizing this, and I know different people are going to feel different things about it, but no matter what, when it came down to it, I wanted to make something from this. Like I said, I didn't want my friends' names to be in vain. I wanted to make something from this. So, in regards to talking to people and stuff, I would say the thing now that makes me happy, and it's not really per se around my car accident, but when now that I've started these businesses and they've been successful and given a lot of people opportunities that maybe they wouldn't have gotten in other areas. Like I said this, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, like 2 of my best developers were delivering pizzas before this, right. And we gave them opportunities, and they just needed a chance, and now they've been successful. And when you have, I don't think about that stuff much, but like I've had people now say to me, like, Justin, you don't understand the chance you gave me and the opportunity and what you changed this for my life and stuff. And that makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I am doing something successful with this business. And at the same time, my friends, that passed away are part of this journey of making other people's lives better, helping other people and stuff.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people out there, so I've had the benefit of thinking about this for a little while, who say, oh, well, shame on that guy. Fuck him,
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of hypocrisy. I know everybody I know has drank too much, had one eye open, driving home, and they made it to the driveway. And it's not the one time they do it. They do it a lot of times, driving buzzed, other things. Because you didn't collide with the school bus doesn't make you any better. If you're not drinking and you're not driving, okay, you're better than Justin, or you're better than all of us. But before you get out there and start throwing some stones, you really should check your hypocrisy and look at yourself. No one knows what you've done and when you've done it, but it could have happened to anybody, and certainly the likelihood of it happening to a 19-year-old Navy kid with a sports car for the first time, and the friends and the drinking and go. So I have a lot of sympathy for you, Justin. I really do, and I know it's a huge burden on you. And I don't know exactly how to resolve that. I would just say some of those folks should really just check your hypocrisy for yourself before you lash out. If you want to throw those stones, Justin's a tough guy. He could probably take it. He's been through it a lot, but I think it's a great story. I think it's it's a sad story, but it's an earnest story, and I really can't wait to see what you do. I mean, honestly, I think I was joking. I was looking at Elon Musk and Occupy Mars. I mean, so if he wore that shirt maybe 30 years ago, everybody look at him like, what a joke. This guy is creating the Boring Company. Do you think he's doing it to build tunnels under Los Angeles? No, he's building it. He's doing it so he can figure out how to bore underneath the soil in Mars, making rockets land, and probably he's friends with President Trump because he's going to need the resources of the free world to actually, make this goal of saying, hey, I'm gonna occupy Mars a reality. I honestly don't think it. I don't see how it's going to happen, but I don't doubt that it's going to happen.
Speaking into existence.
Yeah, I just think it is. So I just think everybody should understand that when you say, hey, I'm going to build $1 billion company in Stafford, there may be some things that your investors may say, how about Sunnyvale? How about, Manhattan? How about Tyson's Corner?
Well, we are a C Corp out of Delaware, so
you may have some things that prevent that from happening, but certainly you've seen, like I said, with Intuit having, making it work for basically a high-tech company with a lot of different functions in Stafford. I think the potential's there, and I think it's key for the area to, have folks like you where it's not solely a government-focused economy. We need dreamers like you to make an effort to change the area, change the tax base, because if you can be successful, it will change the dynamic for this entire area where we're not totally wed to the government dollar, and the government service economy at least,
Yeah, and to touch on two points you made there about being young and stuff and doing those things. I mean, when I was 19 years old, and most young guys I know, you think you're invincible. That's you don't think that these things. You don't think about death, and you don't think about these things. Even though I had experienced that with my brother previously, and then along the lines of the business side of things, my ultimate goal that I tell everybody, I say don't laugh at first, but my ultimate goal is I want to own a professional soccer team one day. That's my goal, and building the $1 billion business. Again, that's a secondary is what will come from that. I hope that if we get to that point, of building a successful organization like that. Think about the countless small businesses that we've helped. I mean, when I was at Intuit, I think the statistic was 98% of businesses in the U.S. are small business. And I want to give these small business owners the power that these large corporations have. I tell my employees this all the time because they're, sitting behind a keyboard programming and doing things for these companies. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, you don't think about it much, but even with, let's take Sunbelt as an example, the group that we work with, there's over 150 employees in that group. Like, we are helping 150 different people and different families put food on the table. Yep. We are a part of them. I feel like I wear a Sunbelt Rentals, name tag on at times and stuff. Yeah. And you don't realize, nobody out there realizes the impact that you truly have on others. If you just care. Yeah. And they trust and you just deliver. Well,
I love this concept. I love that you're looking for these oddball, kids and the labor pool that, everybody discounts, and, you're all about the opportunity. I always say this, and people can hear it on the podcast a lot, shit happens for a reason. Most times it's good. And I'm not saying your friends, perishing is good. I just think for you at least, God bless your dad. It's just great that he gave you that advice, because it wasn't probably what you were expecting. And you follow through with it. You pulled it off. You got the break, and look at you now. I mean, it really is impressive. So, I want to ask you a little bit. So, we talked a little bit about spirituality. I think does that impact you in any way? How does it play? Is it? I don't want to be taboo talking about it, because a lot of people want to talk about it. But has that played a role in your journey and your healing here?
Yeah. So, growing up, I grew up in the church, going to a Baptist church, and then, middle school, 6th through 8th grade, I actually went to Fredericksburg Christian here in our area. So I grew up a lot in the church. I remember, if we want to talk about books about miracles that have happened in people's lives and how they can only attribute that back to God, But I will say that, over the last 10 years, I was kind of in and out of things. I think my problem is, and I say it's a problem, but it's one of the things that's made me successful in businesses is that I am a thinker. I think very deeply into things, constantly thinking, and there's certain aspects of like the Bible and things that I'm like, wow, I just don't see how it can be that way or whatever, and I had to think deeper into it. But by doing that, just recently in the last year, questions have started to become answered in certain areas. And my wife and I and we have 2 children have found a nice church in the last year, 6 months, and we've been going every Sunday, and it's been great for us as a family, just, going to something and walking out of there at the end of the day and just having good feeling and finding a good community. I grew up in different churches where it was, I don't know how to really say this, I don't want to come across wrong, but they were very churchy people, about stuff. And we found a great church and a great community where there's just genuine people. And now at my age, I just turned 40 last year, it just feels good. It's a good environment. It's not people that you feel like, are forcing you to do things, and being in that environment, being around and having some of my spiritual questions answered. Yeah. I actually may have more questions now than I did before, right. but that's opened up my realization of things and has definitely spiritually, helped.
Yeah, and I think that I always say that too with, it's like you go to church and you hear, but you're not really listening. You're not really listening, and it's that faith's important. And, I just think for you, it's important because you're continuing to heal, and you still have a burden. It's out there. It's going to always be there, and you're going to earn this. I mean, there's no question about it in my mind. But it is great. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You got to make sure that you take time and you turn your brain off, and you definitely need to make sure that spiritually that you're okay, emotionally you're okay, because the stress level that you're under, especially with what you're doing, is really, really, really high.
100%. My mother-in-law actually is very big into vibrations and and things like that, and spirituality and everything. So that's opened my eyes up to some different areas as well. But I agree with you 100%. I mean, if you don't, that's with anything, relationships, with anything. If your tank's empty, how can you give to others? Yeah. And to this day, I still, one of my coping mechanisms is still, even though I'm 40 years old, jumping in the world of video games at times. Yeah. It gets me out of stuff.
That's your whole generation. I don't understand.
I need it. I think it keeps me. I do that too. Working out has been a big thing. I started doing the sauna recently. That's been a great thing. So yeah. I mean, you definitely do have to make sure you're recharged. And another thing I would say as a leader, at least, is constantly learning.
Yeah. So let me ask you something about your companies. So have you set? I heard something. I was listening to your. You mention about the. Diary CEO podcast, and I'm listening to podcasts because I actually commute an hour each way. What about the culture of your company? Have you set the culture of your company? They say that if you don't set it, it sets itself. So what's the culture of your company?
100%. So from the beginning, I always wanted to, when I founded my company, I wanted to be, I'm saying this with the air quotes for people listening, a mini Google. Right off the bat, I started my business with my cousin, so I only had one employee, but within a year, we were up to like 4 or 5 employees. And even being, I said 17 earlier, but we have about 13 to 14 full-time. So for 13 to 14 full-time employees that we have, we pay 100% of health care for them and their families. We have IRA now. We, allow unlimited vacation time as long as you're hitting your numbers stuff. We do have an office because I am against the grain when it comes to tech CEOs. And I definitely believe that people being in an office together is better. There's been such a knowledge, transfer between, people that we have in there. So we allow our employees to work from home, 1 day a week, and when they need to, if something's occurring,
it's not going to work. You need to put them in living spaces.
So they work from home, 1 day a week. And the culture that we have is I hire for team fit.
Yeah.
And there's been one or two instances where we've really had to hire somebody who was experienced in a certain area.
Yeah.
I hire for team fit.
Yeah.
And, my best PM had never been in software before. He was director of multiple gyms in the area.
Oh, wow.
Burn boot camp. My director of operations previously ran the Hospitality House hotel for years.
Yeah.
Two of my best developers are previous, delivering pizzas. So they were just people that needed a chance. And we have a little bit of a younger group, but everybody just gets along. And and everybody enjoys working together. And when everybody enjoys working together, if somebody doesn't know somebody else is willing to help them. And that's how we've hired. And we talk about hiring in this area. There's not a lot of software opportunity here. If you want it, you got to commute to DC or whatever. So we've been able to save areas in some of that career salaries and things like that by building in this area, but we're providing jobs that don't normally exist around here. So it's been a great environment, and our culture has continued throughout. But the one thing I will say is, I always go back to this one saying of them when they wanted to send the space shuttle the spaceship to the moon. It's not just a straight shot and they just point it at the moon and just get there. They're constantly saying, okay, well, 3 degrees to the left, 2 degrees to the right. You constantly have to be readjusting. Yeah. And that's how we are at our company. We're not afraid to make changes and make tweaks if we think there's a better process. And I think that's helped us too, because the group of employees that we have been very flexible.
I mean, if you can grow your talent like you're doing, and again, I did this all the time, but it does sound like because of your journey, you're willing to give people chances. And if you have people that have worked in a hotel or done that are not appreciated, do not make money, do not have skills, they have commodity skills, and you give them 100% health care, you're teaching them skills, you want them to be part of a team. I mean, you got a recipe for success if you can continue to develop those assets. I mean, it's amazing, because if you could just judge the person, and obviously you got to judge aptitude and other things, but if the aptitude and the attitude is there, what a tremendous opportunity to work for a company like you're doing. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing, and I don't think my nephews realize this yet, but they've really benefited from this, because I've had both my nephews come in the summers and learn software and stuff, and it's kind of cool to have your uncle owning a tech company. You can come in and learn software. The funny part that you just mentioned about my journey and everything is that most of my staff actually probably doesn't know most of my journey. I've kept it kind of guarded, but I did tell them, hey, I'm going on Neil's podcast today, and I'm going to have you guys listen in on this so you can learn a little bit more about it.
Listen, like and share, please. We have 13 people internationally. No, I'm joking. I don't know what it is, but it's probably going to be pretty good. So honestly, your grit is contagious. This podcast is really built around this, this discipline and the grit and the things that really people don't talk about. It is one of those things as far as is for the journey that, I mean, if you didn't go, you didn't listen to your dad, or I can't imagine what the story would have been. I'm sure it wouldn't have been this story for sure. And you just sort of getting through 5 years of selling hams and trying to figure out your path, and your personal image of yourself as being really low is somehow avoiding drugs and alcohol and things that people do when they get in a rut, and finding your way and keeping your marriage good and your relationship with your kids. And now I look at you doing with the opportunity to recruit labor. I mean, you got the recipe for success, and I'm really, really impressed with you. So
yeah, I think I would thank you very much for saying all those things. And I mean, the one thing I would just leave people on and say is just your past is your past. It's there, but it doesn't define you. I know it's cliche. I know there's sayings like that and stuff, but it doesn't. And it took me a long time to get to that point. A long time. I thought that it completely defined me, my history, and I do credit Intuit a lot, because Intuit really helped me, really steered me in the right path, and I would not be where I'm at to this day if it wasn't for so many other people in my lives, but even just the impact that Intuit had as a company. It's a wonderful company. And I mean, and it's still a grind. I'll tell you that.
Let your legacy define you. I mean, you got a long path ahead of you. 40 is the new 30, I guess. I'm not sure, but you're well on your way. So congratulations on that, and make sure you keep at it, and don't let off the gas at all. I think you're going to be good.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate your time today. This is Neil from the Ring Spaces studio. Thank you, Justin. Thanks for coming today. We're going to have this out, and hopefully we'll have you back, or we can have your team down here someday and come down and visit us at Ring Spaces. So we're glad you came here today.
Sounds awesome. Love the location. It's beautiful.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to Neil on Business. If today's episode hit home, do me a favor. Leave a review, share it with a friend, and subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. And if you're ready to lead with clarity, courage, and confidence, keep showing up. Until next time, stay sharp, stay focused, and keep building. Again, this is Neil Darling from Ring Spaces Studio, and this is Neil on Business. We'll see you next time.